let me tell you what happened to me. I was in the jet engine training area as part of a group, and there was a part on one of those engines that we built at the factory I worked at, and it wasn't the right color. It had been painted white.
Right.
And when we make them, they're black. They were made out of carbon fiber. So I said, standing in the back, I held up my hand and I said, "Sir, why is that part white? When we ship that part, it's black." He goes, "Sir, who are you?" And I said, "I'm Troy Swift from CFAN. We build that part." He goes, "Troy Swift from CFAN. Don't ask questions I can't answer."
That's good.
So I use that too.
That's a good one.
If I'm doing a presentation and somebody asks me one, I just say do something like that too.
I imagine you do a lot of presentations these days, huh?
I do. We're doing a lot of presentations. Most interest is regenerative agriculture and our bat house program and our bat experiments. Still a lot of interest in pecans. That's how we started the business. Yeah. Was in the pecan business, and then it migrated into the lumber business because as you see around you here, these giant native trees occasionally fall, and I always felt like I should be doing something with that giant wood. Yeah. And eventually in 2011, we bought a sawmill and a kiln and started processing those big logs.
That's awesome. When I came out here and filmed the documentary, I left here thinking that you're like this most interesting man in the world. You have this pretty awesome story in how you founded Swift River Pecan. It wasn't even a thought in your mind, and how you started it. You didn't intend to start it, I guess. So for folks that don't know, can you introduce yourself and let everyone know where we're at? This podcast episode is brought to you by Signature Touch. Signature Touch is veteran owned and operated, and it was started by my wife and myself with a mission to provide the highest quality all natural skincare products made from ethically sourced ingredients. We have body butters, lip balms, and deodorants, and the best part is you could use it on yourself, and they're safe for everyone in the family, including your children. My wife's favorite body butter is Bernilla. It's made with bergamot and vanilla botanical extract. People say it smells like key lime pie. My favorite is Lavensense. It's made with lavender essential oil and frankincense. It makes your skin feel so nourished, but it's also good on bug bites and rashes. Check us out today. The website is oursignaturetouch.com. Use code JLA to receive 10% off your first purchase. The website, it's oursignaturetouch.com.
Okay, well, my name is Troy Swift, and I'm the owner of Swift River Pecans. We're in the pecan business, but we're also in the lumber business. We're in the regenerative agriculture business. We don't sell products, but we talk about regenerative agriculture and practice it quite a bit. We're in the bat house business. That's a pure accident evolution of the regenerative agriculture. But it all started when I came to this area in 1978. Went to college here, and I was interested in canoeing and kayaking, in addition to my college studies, of course. But after college. Or during college and after college, I was heavily involved in canoe and kayak industry in this area, and actually did a lot of canoe and kayak racing, both flat water and whitewater, all over the country, and even in Canada one time. But I also became a teacher that could teach people how to do Eskimo rolls and kayaks. So I taught a lot of people how to do Eskimo rolls, and I became a good teacher in that because it was so difficult for me to learn to do it myself. But once I figured it out, I was able to teach other people. So I was employed as a teacher in canoeing and kayaking and whitewater for quite a few years. As such, I would be on the San Marcos River, and the first trip I went on in San Marcos River was in 1978. September of 1978, and we got out at a place. We were doing a river cleanup. We were actually out there picking up trash and putting it in canoes and taking it to the bridge and having it hauled off. I got out at this place on that very first trip, and I looked around. I'm about 20 years old, and I said, man, if I ever had the money, I would buy a place like this. And in 1998, 20 years later, I bought that place. And it had already established old pecan orchards and native pecan trees on it. And I bought the place to live on the river, not to be a pecan farmer. But of course, that natural resource was there. And the way I am, if I see something like that, I'm going to learn about it. So I proceeded to educate myself on pecan farming, stepped into it gradually. But then the neighbors found out what I was doing, and I ended up turning into what's called a custom harvester and harvesting several hundred acres, my places plus the neighbors' places. This was primarily native pecans. At the same time, I was working at a company called CFan, which built jet engine fan blades for big engines, and I started there in 1990, and decided when I bought my first farm in 1998 to plant an orchard, with the intent that by the time I retired from my career job, I would have a producing orchard. So we did that. We planted what we call our Staples orchard in 2001. And that's a 66-acre orchard, but we only planted 9 acres because the rest of it was already pecan trees or pretty much riparian wild river lands, which also appealed to me, so I left a lot of that real wild. Then in 2006, we bought another farm also on the San Marcos River, closer to the little town of Fentress, Texas, and it was 200 acres. By then, I had already started one orchard and was interested in expanding my man-planted orchards, so we planted another 1,000 trees over the next 3 years. And this place also has about 1,000 native pecan trees. Wow. So now that I retired from my jet engine fan blade job in 2016 and had 2 producing orchards. Also, in the meantime, there was a major catastrophe in the neighboring county, in Bastrop County, where a big fire went through and burned a great deal of the piney woods, the lost pines in the Bastrop area, and places east of Bastrop. And in that fire was a sawmill that was completely burned down, and it was the sawmill that people like me would take big logs to have cut up into slabs or lumber and have kiln dried and ultimately made into furniture. Well, they burned in that fire, and I watched their website as that occurred, after that occurred, and finally it became evident that business was not coming back. That fire was in 2011. It was in severe drought we were having here too, and I had hundreds of giant pecan trees die that had never seen it that dry. So a blue ocean opportunity opened up for me. There was the local sawmill, kind of the prominent guy in the area, had burned down and was of an age, I guess, that he didn't want to reestablish the business. And there I was with a new building I had bought for my pecan business, and I also had unlimited pecan trees that had died in this drought. So I bought a sawmill and a kiln and started the lumber business.
When you got into pecan farming, did you have any experience in farming before you started this?
No,
none at all.
I'm a first generation farmer. I never planted a pecan tree till I was 41 years old. Oh. I had a lot of outdoor experience. I was always an outdoorsman, a canoer. Fortunately, my parents, when they were much younger, and so was I, they liked to hike in the mountains. We did a lot of hiking in Banff National Park in Canada, and places like that. We did a lot of snow skiing. I played hockey in Canada. I was always an outdoor sort of person. I never even dreamed I would have an indoor job. Eventually I did, but I retired from that after 26 years, and now my job is almost all outdoors again.
What was that transition like when you started farming, having never done it before? And I imagine it's pretty daunting and mind-boggling when you're trying to learn all this, how to plant trees and what to spray on your stuff, what not to spray. Like, how'd you go through that process?
Well, it's very difficult when you're a first-generation farmer because there's no pre-existing family knowledge. There's no pre-existing equipment. There's no processes. You're just there on the farm, and you have to find out how to farm. And so I made some beginner's mistakes, of course. But the best thing to do, and this is advice I give to anybody, is no matter what commodity you're in, there will be an organization that can support you. In my case, it was the Texas Pecan Growers Association. Was already in existence, and I found out about them. And in that organization, gave me access to the Texas Pecan Short Course, which is held at Texas A&M. I highly recommend that if you're a new pecan farmer or somebody that's bought land with pecan trees. It's important training. And then that organization also has a magazine and field days, continuous improvement activities, lots of things to read. So that's how I eventually became educated in pecan farming. But educated and experienced are two different things. Education is the best you can do if you don't have experience, but experience does teach you pretty fast. So I began harvesting and custom harvesting of other people's properties. That taught me a lot about dealing with rural landowners, and also taught me a lot about dealing with equipment and schedules and doing mechanical work that I had really not been trained in. Even though I had a industrial arts degree and already knew how to weld and draft and do a lot of practical things, I had not done mechanic work on farm equipment before, so I had to learn that pretty quick.
At what point did you call it a farm? Did you buy the place and it was an established farm, or did you, at some point, you said, well, I have a pecan farm now?
Well, really what happened was remember, I was doing it to live on the river. And so one day my wife and I were down in this area that was very overgrown with underbrush, but it also had big trees, lots of big pecan trees. And finally, as I was looking around in there, I noticed that, hey, that tree looks like it's in line with this tree I'm standing at. And then I looked 90 degrees and said, look, that one is too. Next thing you know, I'm standing in probably a 80 or 90-year-old orchard that had been grafted into old varieties like Mahan and Delmas, a variety of pecan back in the early 1900s or maybe somewhere around World War II. So that's where I said, well, I guess we're going to have to learn how to be pecan farmers. And we did. We bought a piece of equipment. We harvested our own farm without any training. So this was all on-the-job training. And that's when I realized I have to go figure out how to do this like the pros do. So that's how I found Texas Pecan Growers Association.
That's awesome. And you live on, and this piece of property that we're on now is pretty historical in the Texas context. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, all of this area is actually, once I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to Texas history until I got older, and now I'm out here with these big trees, and so I read a lot of Texas history books, and it really opened my eyes to what happened here. And what I mean by that is when you look at some of these trees, some of these native pecan trees are estimated to be around 300 years old. That's back when the Comanches and the Tonkawas were here. It's pretty mind-blowing to look at a tree, a living tree today, and say that the Comanches could have been eating pecans off of that tree. Not that tree's parents, that tree. So if some of these big trees could talk, they could teach you about local Texas history. Think what they could tell you with the Indians and Texas independence and floods and droughts and fires and all sorts of things that have happened here in the last 200 or 300 years.
Yeah. Is there an accurate way to tell how old a tree is?
Yes, there is, and of course we're not going to do it. There's two ways that I know of. One is to cut it down and count the rings, which we certainly would not do. There is a technique called coring where they drill a hole into a tree, just like they do in the ice in Antarctica or the Arctic, and then count the rings that way too. But we would not do that either. We'll just guess, and it's pretty evident though the super old ones, and all of them eventually die. I always hate it when one of the big giants dies while I own the property, because I say, why would you die just in the few years that I've been here? But they do. They get struck by lightning, or they die of old age, or some disease finally gets to them.
Yeah.
But pretty remarkable. And so those are the kind of trees when they do fall, and our lumber business does not cut down trees. We only take what Mother Nature knocks down or what man knocks down for some reason, such as a road or a building or something like that. Those are the only kind of logs that end up in our sawmill that we cut up and sell. Those kind of trees, when you saw them up and make them into a product, such as maybe somebody wants to build a big dining room table or a bar top. A lot of them end up in breweries and wineries and restaurants and things like that for bars and tables. But you can tell a customer, you can look at that tree and say, kind of what I said before, you can look at this big board and say, that board in your kitchen, the Tonkawas and the Comanches could have been eating the pecans off that tree. And you point somewhere in the middle of the tree and say, that may have been 200 years ago. You won't see the rings. You'll see you won't see the growth rings that are countable on a slab like that. But still, you can estimate how old the tree is and wonder what was going on in history at that point you're pointing at. What
was the battle that took place that was like up the San Marcos River?
Well, in I believe it was 1840, the Comanches came out of the Texas Hill Country and came down the Blanco River, which runs into the San Marcos River upstream of here, and then they all went down the San Marcos and Guadalupe rivers to Linville, which is what we now call Victoria, and the Comanches were running the Texians or the Texans or whatever you want to call them out into the salt water, which they did. They raided the place. They ran them out. They had to get in boats and things of that nature to survive. The Comanches ransacked the town and loaded up whatever they wanted to bring back, and kind of dressed themselves up in unusual garments that they had taken from the town. By the time they got back up onto the San Marcos River down near Luling, the Texans at Bastrop had heard of the raid, and they intercepted them in that area of Plum Creek. And so the Battle of Plum Creek is what it's called. And from what I understand by the readings, that battle actually strung out from Plum Creek over in the Luling Ockart area all the way to the San Marcos area, to the headwaters of the San Marcos, which means some of that battle was stringing out right across here.
Yeah. That's wild to think about. We talk about it like it's a long time ago, but it was what, like 3 people ago, if you think about it that way?
Actually it is 2 people ago.
Okay.
And let me give you an example. My mom is 97 years old. Okay, so just round that up to 100. So that takes you to 1923, and one person her age before that is 1723, which is well into Indian time period of Texas.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's one thing. As you get older, when you're a young person, you think 100 years ago was a long time. But as you get older, all of a sudden that time doesn't seem that long ago anymore. So just 2 people my parents' age, and we would have been in Comancheria.
That's crazy. That's crazy times to think about. I don't know how we would fare as Americans these days living in those times. I think we're too soft. I always tell my buddy this, that like the men generation, I like to think myself as like a pretty well-rounded millennial. I grew up working with my dad. We, grew up on land and doing HVAC work. So I'm pretty industrial in that sense. But my kids are so far removed from that and that generation. So someone in your shoes, I would imagine you kind of think about like the loss of manliness. I don't know if there's a word to put on it, but you know what I mean? Like the hardness of people. We're kind of a soft civilization now.
Oh, we're extremely soft. Yeah. And actually that's something to be concerned about. I think we're so soft now that we can't even live through 2 or 3 cold days. I mean, we had a cold snap here back in 2021 that brought the whole place to a stop because it went below 10 degrees and snowed, and snow stayed on the ground 3 or 4 days, and people were completely panicked. They didn't know what to do. They didn't have water. They didn't have electricity. They didn't prepare. They just thought the world would take care of them, I guess. And so that event really showed me, just in a very short event, how vulnerable and unprepared modern society is.
Yeah. And then you fast forward a year later, right? Or was it even a year? We had COVID?
Yeah. Oh, then COVID. Yeah. Then COVID comes along, and we have another crisis.
Yeah.
We have a supply chain crisis. So one of the things that concerns me, and we're not talking about farming much here, but I guess we are a little bit. What would happen if something really serious happened? Yeah. How would society react if a nuclear bomb was used in Ukraine, or a terrorist attack of significance was to unfortunately happen again in the United States or even Europe? How bad would the economy crash? How bad would it be for people who literally don't have life skills? Right. They literally don't have life skills. They don't know how to purify water. They don't know how to grow their own food. They don't know how to live without electricity. Yeah. And that just makes us vulnerable. I think it's very important for people to learn to be an outdoorsman, at least experience it to the point where you know how to build a fire. I mean, I know people that don't even know how to build a campfire. It's incredible. Mm. Of course, in my age, and I'm almost 65, we grew up building campfires. We grew up outside. We grew up on river trips, purifying our own water, and living through some fairly difficult times. But even then, back in the 60s and 70s, we weren't living through what Sam Houston, right, and people like that in Texas or U.S. history or even Native American history. They would laugh at us right now. they wouldn't even know what to think of us
Well,
now.
even coming here, traveling here yesterday, I was telling my wife that isn't it weird that like 3 people ago we traveled by horse carriages and horses, and we had cows that we would bring along to slaughter for long trips, and now we just get on our car. I put the luggage rack on top, and we stop and get gas. They stop at Buc-ee's. I was like, it's nice, but it's so different.
Well, it's easy, and of course I appreciate those things. I don't want to do like some of our historical figures like Stephen F. Austin, did things like walk to Mexico City, or LaSalle, when his group got stranded in Matagorda Bay, they got out and decided to walk to Quebec.
Yeah.
They didn't make it, but anyway, that's what people did then, and even in the 1800s, just think of, for instance, when Jack C. Hayes decided to go to Boston. Mm. Well, how do you do that? You ride a horse, or walk, or both.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we live in a pretty privileged and easy society right now.
Now we get food. Now you just order on an app. You get food bought to you in your house.
That's right.
I think the pandemic woke up a lot of people up, though. I think they started to realize how disconnected our society is away from farmers and ranchers and our food system.
It did, and I can tell you from experience by the people I meet, since I've realigned my business, my farming business, to regenerative agriculture, that gets attention, just like this podcast, for instance. But we've had a lot of people come here because we're practicing regenerative agriculture. And there are organizations, there's all sorts of organizations now that I've either attended their conferences or even spoken at their conferences, organizations I didn't even know existed, that are really, the core is to self-reliance. Self-reliance, growing your own food, making your own clothes, and being independent of society to some extent, and being independent of government to some extent. But really, I wouldn't call them survivalists, and I wouldn't call them off the gridders, although some of them are. But it's really people that have understood that what we take for granted could go away someday with some kind of a disaster, and they're preparing for it. Yeah. And I think that's a smart thing to do.
Can you talk about that shift? What turned you on to regenerative agriculture?
Well, so part of it to me is common sense. I have been, like I say, an outdoorsman or outside. You could even call me a nature nut all of my life, to tell you the truth. I've always observed nature. And so if you're in an orchard or a grove like this one we're in right now, these big pecan trees, these pecan trees didn't need people 300 years ago. They were here. They didn't need a man with a tractor spraying something on them. They didn't need any of that. And so I observed that, and I go, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? These trees are looking at me. These 200- and 300-year-old trees are looking at me going, you're just another critter that wants our pecans, and you're going to leave just like the other ones did someday. They're in a different time frame than we are. But another reason, so one reason is Mother Nature demonstrates that, at least in the native world, she might not need as much help as we might want to give her. But in the man-planted orchards, it's a different story. So native pecan trees to me are like buffalo. You wouldn't have to do a whole lot to a buffalo to make it live and reproduce and be productive. But improved variety pecans are more like a modern milk cow. They do require some attention. They are hybridized, so some of their natural defenses against nature have been hybridized away. for the benefit of a bigger pecan or a better pecan or a pecan that shells better in mechanical equipment or taste or something like that. And they do outproduce the natives drastically. The improved varieties make far more pounds per acre than the natives do on average, as long as they're maintained. And what does that mean? Well, maintain means that they have to have water, they have to be irrigated, they have to be fertilized, you have to do weed control around them. When they're young, you have to prune them. And there's also pest control measures that have to occur, or you can lose the crop. And there are 2 or 3 different pests, one's a fungus and one's a moth, that can take the crop. And if you're not on top of your game, you can actually lose a pecan crop to a pest called the pecan nut case bearer. You can lose the crop in May when the pecans are just barely big enough to see, and you wouldn't normally harvest pecans until October or November. So you can actually lose a crop in May if you're not on your game. Same thing with a pecan fungus called scab. That can come on if the weather conditions are right and severely degrade the pecan quality or even cause loss of crop. And so if you're not on that, if you don't have a plan to deal with that, you can or will lose the crop in a wet year. Now, the fertilizers and the fungicides and things of that nature are very expensive. And if you go back to kind of our vulnerability to outside forces, one of those is fertilizer. So when the war in Ukraine broke out and other international issues and our issues with China, there are fertilizers that suddenly became very expensive. So these are conventional fertilizers, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Suddenly the prices doubled. So this is all starting back in 18 and 19, and the pandemic had an influence on that too, plus international problems. But all of a sudden, our traditional fertilizers, and that goes into fungicides and herbicides and every management chemical there is, the prices went through the roof. So there's one serious problem. A farmer can't exist if their inputs cost more than they make on their crop. You just can't exist like that. So the other side of the coin is I started studying soil health, and in some cases you can say, well, why are these trees sick? Why do these trees need extra management? Is there a reason for that? And so the more I studied soil health, the more the light bulb came on. And I said, well, you know what? Maybe what I've been doing by applying nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, even though they do need that, maybe I'm doing too much of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I am getting the soil biology out of balance. Turns out, the more I study, the more I started believing that. And so what we're trying to do is get the soil minerals and the soil biology balanced back to where they're supposed to be, which helps the tree fight off some of these diseases and pests because the soil is healthy. Add to the fact that we quit mowing, so there goes an expense. Mowing's extremely expensive on large acreage. It's labor intense. It's fuel. It's the fuel's expensive. The labor is expensive, and the machine maintenance is expensive. So we got rid of most of that, other than essentials like right around sprinkler heads and trees and things like that. And we do mow before harvest. But what are we doing now? We're growing tall grasses, and then I learned about this thing called the seed bank, which is old and ancient seeds that have been waiting for you to leave the place alone so they could come back. And guess what? They did. We started getting a much broader biodiversity on the orchard floor. That then, of course, is adding to the biodiversity underground, and those plants are harvesting sunlight and sending the carbohydrates and the sugars as exudates down into the soil, where there's soil organisms of all types that live symbiotically with plants that need those synthates that come down, and then they provide their own minerals and energy to the trees. It's a symbiotic relationship. Add to that now, if you have a good biodiverse orchard floor, then you have a more biodiverse animal population that lives above the soil. So now we're increasing biodiversity above the soil, and there's a lot of good beneficial insects that need flowers. They need different kinds of plants in order to live, reproduce, eat. So now, instead of a mowed golf course looking orchard floor, we now want a wild looking multi-species, high biodiversity group of plants there that support the organisms above and below ground. And that even goes up to your mammals. Now, mammals and birds. So now if you have insects of all sorts there all the time, then you're going to have beneficial higher order animals that eat those bugs and also use those plant resources. And so what we like to do is call the birds, for insect control, we like to call our birds the day shift. We like to call our bats the night shift.
What was the process like of transitioning? Did you just cut off all the herbicides, the pesticides, or was it a slow transition that you kind of weaned yourself off of?
Well, the first and easiest one to transition away from was herbicides. In my heart, I always felt like spraying herbicides was wrong. I was doing it because I was taught that way. I thought it was right. You'll hear that from lots of farmers. What we were trained is we thought we were doing right, but I always felt that was wrong. So I just eliminated herbicides. We weren't doing a lot of herbicides, but we were doing it around the tree base and around the sprinkler heads. And I just said, we got to send a man out there with an expensive chemical that we probably don't really want in the orchard anymore. And there's time and labor and cost involved with that too. I said, why don't we just use line trimmers? It does take longer to keep things functional with line trimmers than it does with herbicide, but we're not spraying a substance on the orchard floor that we don't want there anymore either. And in my case, the herbicide was really not necessary. So it may cost a little bit more to not use herbicide, but to me, it's a better management practice.
Can you tell a difference in your crop or the taste of the pecan since you've done this transition? How long have you been moving away?
We started in 19, and back to your question, we didn't just jump off the cliff. And if you listen to people knowledgeable about this transition from conventional to regenerative, most of them will give you the advice that you need to do it gradually. Do a test plot. Don't throw the whole farm under a new system, and then if it fails, you wish you never did it, and you go back. And so no, what we did is started introducing new fertilization schemes such as Johnson Sioux bioreactor extract. If you don't know what Johnson Sioux bioreactor is, look it up. It's very easy to build, and I'll tell you, it makes really fine compost, and it's fast, and it's a good way to use wood chips. High carbon materials up. So anyway, Johnson Sioux bioreactor extract, rock minerals that I had the pleasure of meeting a lady named Betsy Ross who ran a company called Sustainable Growth Texas a few years ago. Unfortunately, she's now passed, but she kind of introduced me to these compost extracts, and rock dust and things of that nature. So we started applying those and quit mowing at the same time. And the whole point is to enhance the biology in the soil, make the soil biodiversity much greater, so that the symbiotic relationship of the plants and the soil organisms can support the plants. Now, you have to have organic material to do that. And so a very important reason that I went to regenerative agriculture and a soil health mentality was the more organic matter you have in the soil, there's a lot of good things that happen. One is it has a much higher water holding capacity. And I think the estimates are that for every 1% of organic matter you have in the soil, you gain 15,000 to 25,000 gallons of water holding capacity per acre. Well, in this part of Texas, that is like real important. Okay, water. There's a trick question in a lot of the regenerative agriculture classes or seminars you go to. They'll say, from a fertilizer or an elemental perspective, what is your most limiting factor? And most people answer, well, nitrogen or phosphorus or manganese, and the real answer is water. In this part of the state, it's water. So we want to use soil health and organic matter as a countermeasure to drought. We actually use it as to protect ourselves from drought. It does a lot of other things too. Just the fact that the water is soaking in and being held means that you're not leaching away minerals and fertilizers that you may have put out. It reduces erosion, and the grasses and plants that grow on the orchard floor also shade the soil so that it's not so hot. And you take a year like this where we set records from June through August for high temperatures. It was a horrible year, and I'm grateful that I started this regenerative way of thinking, because I had good grasses and good vegetation on the orchard floor instead of hot
Dead
dust,
grass, yeah.
hot dirt and dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is the rest of the industry, I guess pecan industry specifically, looking at regenerative agriculture? Is there a lot of people talking about it?
There is a lot of people talking about it. There's also a lot of people that don't want to talk about it. There are quite a number of organizations and farmers in this area that are either changing to this type of farming or are studying it. And in this area, there was one man that got me really interested in this, because I went to his orchard in August a few years ago, and I could tell right when I got out of the car that this man had the advantage. And it's because he had been doing this regenerative agriculture for 16 or 17 years, and his orchard looked great in the middle of August. Well, if you want to see when an orchard looks stressed, it's in the middle of August if it's been over 100 for a month. His orchard looked great. His name is Dennis Purrs. He's in Georgetown, Texas. And So he kind of got me interested, and then I got interested, and now there's quite a few farmers in this area that are participating in a study that is being performed by the Noble Research Institute in Ardmore, Oklahoma. We're all part of a group that part of a 6-year study where the Noble Research Institute is coming here and taking soil samples and leaf samples and even pecan nutrition samples.
Wow.
To see that if we go on a regenerative agriculture and soil health journey for the next 6 years, are we actually growing a more nutritious pecan? Now that's going to take a little while. You asked earlier, do I see a difference? yes, but it's hard to put a number on. I had the best, highest yields in one of my orchards that I've ever had last year. I also have won quite a number of pecan awards for high quality pecan awards at the state show. In fact, this last year, we won state champion for the second time. And I always enter my pecans into the state pecan show to see how we're doing relative to everybody else. Right. So and we're doing good. That's awesome. So I think higher yields and high quality is there. But in regenerative agriculture, that's a paradigm change. I just got through saying we had the high yields, but what really is the measure is, are you making a profit or not? And so yields does not necessarily mean profit. And are we able to grow high quality pecans with less inputs using more natural processes? And if we are, we're going to be profitable. But if we're doing it the old way, where we're subject to the fluctuations and price increases of conventional fertilizers, and we are in a wholesale situation selling pecans by the 18-wheeler load at market price, which may not be good, we're very vulnerable to not making any money. So I've taken my business pretty much as far away from the wholesale market as I can, and I try to retail everything I can. And to retail, you have to be growing quality. So we grow quality pecans, and it is amazing how many people come into our store and taste our pecans and go, I have never tasted a pecan this good. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. For one reason, in the big pecan market, and it's a problem for the industry, is that pecans that you buy in large stores are often old or have not been stored properly. And by the way, the right way to store pecans in the shell or already shelled is frozen. Most people don't know that. And so what they do is they end up buying a bag of pecans in a store that is rancid. It hasn't been stored properly. If the pecan meats are the color of root beer, getting dark like dark root beer, they're no good. And so people will buy those, eat them, and think pecans don't taste good, and they'll never buy another one in their life. So our job is to grow, store, and sell high quality pecans so that people like them and they taste very good. But the other good thing about pecans and it's important for people to know, pecan is a superfood. It is extremely healthy. It's good for your heart. It's good for your blood system. It's good for your general health. And I could go into some of those details, but it'd be best if the listener just researches that. But pecan is highly nutritious, and people that eat a lot of pecans are doing themselves a favor.
Well, that's one of the ways you turned your health around, right? Was pecans.
It is. In fact, back in 2019, I was considerably heavier than I am now, and wasn't exercising as I should, other than working, but that's different. And the doctor finally said, "Troy, we're gonna call you a type 2 diabetic." And I said, "No, you're not." I said, "We're not going to do that." And I had already been privy to some research in pecans about how healthy it is, and even there was even some articles suggesting that it may help with type 2 diabetes. One of those has since been published, by the way. And I said, "No, I'm not going that route." So I took butter out of my diet and replaced it with pecan oil. And I eat lots of pecans as well. And I put pecan oil in my diet and started exercising. And it's true, I started doing other things too that you should do, exercise and not eat as much ice cream and things like that. But I did put pecan oil as my butter substitute in, and in 6 months my blood was right back where it needed to be, and it has been since. And that's been 4 years now.
You turned me on to pecan oil. I didn't even know that was a thing. We bought some last time we were here, and it's good.
Oh, it's real good. And the thing is if it's made right, and we do make it, by the way, it's literally squeezed pecans. It's no heat. It's no chemicals. It is literally, you put pecans in a press, and the oil drips out when you're pressing it, and then you go through a settling and a filtering process, and when it's done, it looks like liquid gold. Wow. It's beautiful to look at, and it has a really high smoke point. It has a 470 smoke point, so you can stir fry in it. But I use it anywhere you would use butter or dressing. You can put it on salads. You can put it on meat. But I use it on my wheat toast instead of butter. It's wonderful.
Okay.
So anyway, try some pecan oil, and when you buy it, make sure you buy it from somebody who's making it look really gold. It's supposed to be gold colored, not really light, clear liquid.
Oh, so what happens if it's the clear liquid?
Well, it's just processed, probably more processing involved, and maybe not starting with fresh pecans or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but I can tell you that the cold pressing process makes beautiful product.
That story or that study that you're talking about, are you familiar with Dr. Van Vliet?
No.
He led some studies on bison meat, regeneratively raised bison meat compared to conventional raised bison meat, and even beef cattle. And he was saying that he's kind of like the world-renowned doctor on comparing phytochemicals and the nutrients in beef, and that's what it reminds me of your pecans. I'm interested to see the outcomes. Are y'all comparing regeneratively grown pecans versus conventional grown pecans?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the Noble Research Institute study is also really they're studying multiple management practices in pecan orchards. For instance, regenerative, like what we're doing without rotational grazing. They're studying it with rotational grazing, and they're also studying native pecans, no grazing, native pecans with grazing. Anyway, all the population of their study has different management practices, and they're collecting the pecans from all of those. And in 6 years, we should know whether one practice or the other tends to make a more nutritious pecan or not. Or at least that's the goal.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting study.
Yeah.
That's one of the pillars of regenerative agriculture, right, is rotational grazing or animal impact.
Yes, it is.
And y'all use natural animal impact. Y'all don't have, or y'all bring in goats or something, right?
No, we don't. I have never been one that wanted to deal with domesticated animals, and I'm not going to. But it is a pillar of of regenerative agriculture. So the idea is that people bring in, make small grazing areas or small paddocks, graze it pretty intensely, and then move them rapidly to a different location, so that the plants have time to recover. But the theory is that the eating of the plants, the trampling of the plants that have not been eaten, and the deposition of urine and dung and saliva and ruminant organisms that came out of the animal build soil health. And that's something I did not believe 5 or 6 years ago, but I do now. So we don't do that. Instead, what we are doing is you can look at that as either a good or a bad. We have an extremely dense wild deer and feral hog population here, so our orchard floors are seeing a lot of animal action. But in addition, we're coming along with the Johnson Sioux bioreactor compost extract, which is high fungal dominated compost, and we've had that proven in the lab by Andy Marsh and by Rhizocell LC. We've had that proven several times now. So we're coming in with those sort of substances to try to substitute for the cattle.
Okay. And all that in the Sue Johnson bioreactor, all that's used, all that material, that raw material, I guess you would say, is coming off your property.
Yes, it's. I did 6 experiments with 6 different recipes, and it turns out the easiest one was the best one, which was wood chips.
What can you say? What the other stuff is?
Well, yeah, I used sawdust. I used wood shavings, which are also good from our sawmill. We do planing at our sawmill operation, so we had shavings. So I tried shavings. I tried pecan shells because we shell pecans, and I tried spent grains from beer breweries and whiskey distilleries, and kept good notes, ran it all at the same time in the same location with the same amount of water, and it turns out the wood chips worked the best. It was the fastest and had the best population and diversity of organisms in it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about the corporate capture of the movement of regenerative agriculture? Now all the big name brands are wanting to get a part of it, and they're dedicating X amount of their sales to regenerative farms, or their products coming from regenerative farms. Do you have any comments on that?
I'm not concerned about it if it's real. If the big corporations are actually doing it and it's actually improving soil health and making better food, then I think that's a good thing. But like what happened in the organic world, there are some organic practices that are actually not really beneficial for the environment, and may not even be good to be using as in food processing. But the if it's done legitimately, I'm not concerned about it. In fact, I hope it happens. The other good thing is if big industry gets into it, then as there is now, there will be new products and new technologies that become available for those of us who are trying to do this, give us more tools in the toolbox. An example of that is biologic fungicides. So in the past, where we had to spray what I would call conventional fungicides with different FRAC numbers that you have to rotate through to keep from your target species from building resistance to. Now there's one that's or several now that are actually bacteria that we spray that eat the fungus and on the trees. And so we tried that this year. It worked pretty good. So these new technologies are coming on as a result of industry accepting regenerative agriculture.
Interesting. Do you subscribe to any of the certifications that are being developed now around regenerative ag? There's one in particular, it's the Regenerative Organic or Organic Regenerative Alliance. It's one of those ways that you say it. Do you try to get any of these certifications? How important is that to you?
Right now, it's not important. Right now, what's important is that we figure out how to manage the soil and the biodiversity to grow a more profitable and more nutritious product. That's what we're doing. If we get constrained by a certification, then constrained might be the right word. They might not agree with what I want to do, and therefore I can't get certification. Now, later on, it may be something that's viable. I don't know yet. I haven't studied any of those certifications. But if you look at it from being organically certified, I certainly don't want to do that. It constrains you too much. Also, these things add work with documentation and proof and all of those sort of things. And they might not have a tool that I need for a particular problem I'm having.
Yeah.
One of the sayings in agriculture is, if you look at somebody like me, and again, I'm first generation, but a lot of people are third or fourth generation doing this. But for me, they might say, how many years of experience do you have? And of course, the normal answer would be, well, I have 25 years of experience. But the saying is really not like that. I have 25 years of different experiences. And every year is different in farming. Any farmer will tell you that. You'll have different pest stress. You'll have different water problems, or wind, or I mean, any number of things.
Yeah, I'm kind of a pessimist when it comes to those certifications too.
Yeah,
I talked to. Have you heard of Mill King Dairy?
No.
They're out of the Waco area, and he was saying he actually worked for organic dairy, the organic dairy certification process, and he went to organic dairy farms, and he was saying that dairy farms that are organic are dirtier than conventional ones that don't have the organic certification, because you can't medicate the cows, you can't properly take care of them. But this new regenerative organic certification, I was talking to this winery who's one of the first wineries in their county to get this certification. So I was asking the land steward, like, do they come out every so often and test your soil, look at your vineyard, do they get in the field, what do they do? And he's like, they don't do any of that. They just look at the paperwork.
Yeah. Well, I may be open to it in the future. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't think the whole system has matured to the point where we want to tie ourselves down with a certification. I think we have to use all the tools in the toolbox. And the good news about regenerative agriculture is it gives you a lot more tools, and most of those tools are cooperating with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
And we just weren't taught to do that.
Yeah. Well, Troy, I know we're coming up on time, man. I appreciate your time. I'm very thankful for you hosting us and you letting us come out here and hang out.
Sure.
How can people follow you, get a hold of you, and come check you out?
Well, so the best way is to go to our website, swiftriverpecans.com. And if you're interested in we do have a segment on our regenerative efforts there if you want to see what they are. We're real excited about our new collaboration with Merlin Tuttle's Bat Conservation and our bat house experiments, where we put 17 bat houses in our orchards and other orchards around, and are monitoring what bats occupy these houses at what times of year. In fact, I just got guano analysis back from a lab that we send it to for get DNA analysis to see what they eat, and it came back in 6 weeks, from early April to 1st of June. There was 106 different species of insects that those bats had eaten just in that 6 weeks.
106.
Now we're trying to build a profile of what they're eating all year. And so there's another good reason for biodiversity, right? If we don't have any bugs around, the bats are not going to stay around. But those bats, and these were evening bats, by the way, but these bats eat just about anything that flies. And pecan nut case bearer and hickory shuckworm are two of our major pests, and we want those bats eating those moths. So we're doing a lot of work with bat houses and bat science right now, and it's fascinating. This is another thing I would have never dreamed I would have ever been involved in.
That's wild.
Who ever thought Troy would be concerned with bats?
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. They're fun to watch, and they're very effective predators.
Does their droppings help too with the trees?
Well, it would if you had enough of them. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, bats been mined as fertilizer for ages all over the world.
Okay.
But we're not making enough to to make any difference. We're using them as the night shift pest control for flying insects is what we're doing. So anyway, go to swiftriverpecans.com. You can see videos of that. You can see videos of how we harvest. You can see videos of how we run our sawmills, and you can even see videos of nematodes and soil organisms swimming around in soil in the microscope. So we're in it all the way. I'm really enjoying the new approach through regenerative agriculture. I feel better about it in general, and I think the term that you hear from people like John Kempf and other people that you can hear podcasts and educational things from is that what we're aiming for is the healthy soil. Healthy soil makes a healthy plant, makes healthy food, makes healthy people, and that's what we're really trying to achieve.
Well, you're kicking ass, man. I'm a fan, and I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the time.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye.